Year respected, expert level information, entertainment, education. Rev Yearwood got you covered as you hit your destination. Climate rules everything around me. Dream. For those who lost focus, close your eyes and just dream. Open your third eye, now the world is your office. Coolest show you know is the Hip Hop Caucus.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the coolest show. I'm so excited for this conversation because we have this once a season, and I'm here with the producers of the coolest show, and that's such an important commodity because I think that a lot of times you hear me, or you may hear Tamara. You hear Tamara a lot, one of the other producers, and you may occasionally hear Destiny, but you don't get to hear Cross. And so I'm glad all of us get to then be here at the same time. So I'm here with Destiny Hodges and Tamara Toles O'Laughlin and DeJuan Cross. And how are y'all doing today?
Doing good.
Oh, not they're so used to being behind the scenes that they forgot you got to kind of talk to make the podcast work. But they all just that's true in true producer ways. They all just started nodding their heads. So while they're nodding their heads, let me just tell you, thank you all for being a part of this family. Thank you all for being a part of this community. We appreciate you. The ideas behind the coolest show still continue. It is simply that we need to lift up, particularly Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, queer, and young people to be listened to as a solution and as the solution and as the purpose for how we can transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And we've tried to approach this in a very serious fashion. And so I just want to say that last year in season 5, we might remember how we ended. We ended with Heather McTeer Tony, Before the Street Lights Come On, which is her book, and her phenomenal conversation with Tamara. We had Rakia Lumumba discussing The Crisis Continues and what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. We had on our EPA administrator, Michael Regan. We had, this is all our Black executive section. Right? If you ever heard or seen these, please go to the website at thecoolestshow.com. And you can check it out. Also, I think we have up the bios, new bios up on the website of the producers. So you can go there and see them and see their bios. But last year we had Dr. Shalon White Newsom. We had so many different people who were a part of the conversation. And so you can go back, and we went to the HBCU climate conference, Jahi Wise. I mean, we went on and on. And then I just wanted to say, before we get to our conversation, we had in memoriam, because we lost somebody. We lost Ibrahim Abdul Mateen, and who was a dear friend of mine and Tamara and the show. And so it was hard for us to then go back and look at that and see that this is these countries are important, because sometimes these may be the last time we get to hear and talk with who we're interviewing. And so we get to memorialize them. The other day I was with attorney Colette McEachin, who is the wife of former Congressperson Donald McEachin, who passed, was an environmental justice champion. And she didn't know. She didn't know, actually, that he had been on the show. And so I told her that. And she would then, as we send her the links, she would then hear her husband in that context, words that she hadn't heard before. So that would be a gift. It's a gift. And so she would get to hear. And I'm actually praying that when she hears that, that would be just both a blessing and be able to remember. And for all those who have gone on, who we've had on the show or have lost people, we continue to pray, because ultimately this show is here to ensure that we live long, beautiful, amazing lives. So with that, let's get right to this producers roundtable. Actually, one thing I want to make sure that we had that was important, and I mentioned that, was around care and repair. So I actually want to just bring in, because actually, you remember, Tamara leads that for her organization, and Destiny's actually over there with the board. So Tamara, I didn't mention care repair. Give us a recap, and actually, where are we now with that?
People still don't care.
They still don't. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Okay. Well, you heard it right there, folks. So on to the next thing here on climate finance. No, go ahead.
Just making sure you're alive out there, everybody. I think it's important to spend a little time with the state of the movement. We're in a moment where hell is literally in the handbasket.
Mm,
I mean, all the things we've talked about, the infrastructure that's crumbled, isn't just buildings and bridges and roads and tunnels. It's community and spirit and um, roads to care and false scarcity. And so a lot of the things we've talked about have actually been about care and repair. This particular focus that we did on the climate burnout report, which came out last year, that really laid out the extent of the burnout that people are experiencing inside of movement, was a really powerful reflection on how it's showing up for the people who are standing at the front lines with the picket, the people who are planning the revolution. Because, as I have said, many times, if you don't have toilet paper or water, you don't have a revolution.
mm,
So the people behind the scenes who make sure that the placards are painted and that there's people moving in a direction and they're not tripping over each other, those folks are experiencing burnout. Specifically, 68% of the folks who responded to our survey reported very high burnout, which means they're not just burned out, they're deeply burned out. They're long-term burned out. They've been living with burnout. 79% of the folks who took the survey scored very high on exhaustion. And the difference is that depending on who responded, the reasons for the burnout and the exhaustion were as much related to what's happening with the planet as the people they work with, the conditions they serve under, their lack of access to resources, and whether or not they feel, as Destiny says, capacitated to do the thing that they're going to do. Also, 33% of the folks who responded said that they feel like their work environment is challenging because that they're trying to do is impossible.
mm.
And it would be easier to do the impossible if they felt supported and cared for. So we spent a lot of time during this amazing set talking to our elders and the yelders and the young folks, all sharing their wisdom across conversations around lateral violence and what we're doing to each other in the workplace, how the legacy of being told that you work as your badge of pride leads to burnout in elders that then don't show up for the youngers or the yelders in between. And then we talked about solutions, which was, reflecting on the idea that you have to be paid to do this work that supports everyone, but it should also give you enough resources to sometimes not be at work. It meant building practices across the community to be as respectful for the time people need away as the time people need in front of their desk, in the streets, organizing, and how much of that is also work and it should be considered work. And that ultimately the best thing for this movement is if we dismantled systems of oppression.
Mm.
Like so many of the people who responded, the answer was that, what would help me is if my skin color wasn't a barrier to working even in my own community. It would help me if my gender wasn't a barrier to me being able to have resources so that I could show up for this work. It would help me. And so people had lots of demands, but they all added up to dismantling systems of oppression, which include fossil fuel infrastructure and what it has done to our movement. And so we ended that series, just like the report, on a note that if we have a desire for people to have a workplace that supports people and planet, we actually have to support people on the planet. And it was really beautiful to end with the incredible healers that joined us to talk. I mean, just so many incredible people. Peggy Shepard, Michelle Mahaka. I feel like Destiny really did a beautiful job with bringing some really touchy, painful things to light in a conversation with Michelle and Vic Barrett around how youth impacts are ongoing because that's our future that we're messing up.
Mm.
And so I just think landing in a place where we talk to some yelders about the healing practices that they are employing is an ongoing conversation. So I'll go back to my first point and say, yeah, people are still burned out, but I think people are a lot more aware of it than they were this time last year. They feel a lot less personally persecuted by it, and the work continues. So it's just really just a powerful testament to how much everyone in this community, the Hip Hop Caucus community, the Cooler Show family, folks at home washing laundry while you listen to us, how much you care about what it means to do work that affects the whole planet. So we'll continue doing that. But it was great to step deeply into that conversation last season.
Wow. Destiny, I want you to follow up on that, but this and obviously you can't speak for all young people. That's not what you would want to do or what you can do. But from
Thank you
your
for
perspective of just looking at this who you're around, just being around and in community with people who are like you. How healthy and how do you think that people in your community or people who are outside your community, how are they doing with care and repair?
Ooh, in order to answer that, I feel like I have to personally answer it as well, and I feel
Yeah.
comfortable doing that amongst y'all. For context to those listening, I just turned 24. I believe when Vic and Michelle and I were talking, they're also 24, so we're all the same age. Vic had been doing,
Quarter century party.
I'm right there. I'm right there.
Do the kids do that? Do people still do that? The quarter century
I
party?
don't know, but I would like to do one when I turn 25. I want like a 70s party, like everybody needs to show up. But to stay focused, y'all all excited. Yeah, I'm 24 and I'm at a place now where I'm taking serious my health and wellness, like holistically, as in physically, mentally, spiritually, like my body, getting into somatics. And I honestly have Tamara to thank a lot for that. Because after like enduring the breakdown kind of an organization, due to a lack of care and repair or a lack of infrastructure for that, not that we didn't desire it, I had to like reorient my life to be like, I don't want to like be burned out now or in 20 years. The work continues, right? And what does it look like to look around and see my elders either not alive, not familiar with themselves because they've dedicated so much of their lives to caring for other people, whether that be movements or families, so on and so forth, and working or living to work in the empire that we're in. And I don't want to be there. So I had to reorient my life. And I'm still doing that and still getting acquainted with what it means to be me as somebody in their 20s should be doing. And that's difficult. And it's a process, it's life, right? But I think what's important to note in connection to your question, Rev, is that so many of us that are young and in movement, especially those leading organizations, like organizing folks, we're neglecting ourselves. And it's not necessarily a choice. We just also aren't equipped or mentored or given guidance to do otherwise. And our examples, well, there aren't really that many examples because, again, as Tamara is laying out, the whole movement is burnt out. So who do we have to look to be able to see like, okay, this is what it looks like to rest, right? And as Black folks, young Black people, when I look at my family, and I was talking to Tamara and folks about this at the retreat with Climate Critical, all of the women that I know, right, I'm a Black queer femme, have been caretakers their whole lives. Like my grandma's never been to a beach. I didn't know that until like, fairly recently. And I'm just like, whoa, like, what do you mean? Or like, just asking some of my elders, like, what do you care about? What do you like to do? And they can't necessarily tell me because they've spent their whole lives. And that's really disheartening to me. And I started to realize like, I need to get familiar with what I want to do too. And I want like my friends and the people I'm in community with to do the same. And let's enjoy life. Like, yes, oppression is real. We're living under empire. And that shouldn't we should rebel in a way that doesn't allow it to suck the life out of us. Right. Like I like to be outside. I can't be inside every day, like on meetings all day, every day, although that's important in like, fighting this fight, but I need to take care of myself, right? Like, what is my psyche like? All of these things. And I don't think people are doing that well, if I'm being honest, especially in the age of social media, which is really critical to our movement and a super powerful tool. And it can be really overbearing and overwhelming. I mean, we're watching live multiple genocides all day, every day, and genocides have been occurring for quite some time. Look at the US's track record and other Western nations, right? It's not new. But what is new is the way that we're documenting it and the way that we can all across the world see it in real time. And it has a huge impact on our mental health, on our everything. And it's encouraging and empowering people to get to the streets, which is beautiful. And I know we're going to talk about like the student encampments and things. And people should check on us of all ages. People should check on us, but most definitely check on the young people because we've all lived through so much, right? And this generation, as in Gen Z, younger millennials, we've lived through so much online. And we keep getting constantly reminded of that every single day while we're actively living through it and actively connecting to people all across the world. And that's overwhelming. So that was a long answer, Rev, but I don't.
No. But that was that was a good answer. I actually want to come back to you because something you said was very important that I think people would want to dig more into. But I want to make sure for get the Cross. I want to see Cross, how you doing? And actually, I know we had a little break between. I know we're kind of now in season 6, so we had a break between season 5. None of y'all made no new humans, right? Y'all could have. I'm not sure. I don't.
Not on this podcast.
Okay. I just well, not. I mean, that would be a great. That'd be a great podcast. I'm sure people would really tune in for that one. But I mean, I'm making sure. I mean, y'all know. I don't know if y'all did in your off time. I mean, I know. I'm just making sure. And I leave that because I'm going to Cross. I'm making sure.
Cardi B cut of this podcast does not exist. There are no Cardi B cuts.
I read about the
FCC
make an announcement that I did
until the revolution. Until the revolution.
You see that? That's so funny. So Cross, you see, we was teaming you out there because we just, we want to get into your business, but we know you be hanging around with Neo and folk like that. So we want to make sure we want to make sure anything can happen in Cross World, y'all.
The sisters we must.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't clean blood up. I'm just going to slide into something else to say, Red, before the Cross touches on that. Can I just say that Destiny reminded me that we go on retreats.
Yeah.
Thanks, Destiny. As the person who plans these daggone practices where we take movement people to stop being at work together for a while so they could do that too and have conversations with that start with something other than. And my praxis is what I'm trying to get you to understand is, are you going to do like just where you could just be a person and eat and sleep and remember that you have hobbies or that you got into this work because you enjoy it? Climate Critical also does that. So like within one of the things that's been going on in between is we took our annual rest practice where we just practice being people who aren't at work together so that we can validate the experience of stepping back. So just wanted to say, thanks for that.
And all that is right. I mean, I remember just folks last year I was here, the Cooler Show crew, we went, we hung out in New York. First, Tamara has the most bomb EV vehicle you're you want to check out. But just, I don't want to get them. They ain't giving no money to the podcast, so I can mention who they are. But she got a hook. She got the bomb. Her and her husband have 2 bomb EV vehicles. But I just want to say we hung out at the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and it's just important that I just think I personally, and next year, Nancy mentioned she'll turn 25. It'll be my 35th kind of year in the movement next year. So we all need. I'm not sure if I'll be wearing the 70s stuff that I just have from the 70s, and so it'll be like I just don't stop, and so I'll just show up. There's like, you got a 70s? I got what I have from the 70s, and so I can. I'll be fine. But Cross, man. So I was leaning to you because 2024 started with a bang in the culture. Obviously with Cat Williams and many other things. It's been like the year of truth, right? And on your side and in the culture world. So I just want to say that, one, how are you doing? I know, and because you kind of have one foot there and one foot over here. How are you doing? Man, I love you, my brother. So I tease you, but I want you to do well. How are you doing? And if you listen to Tamara and Destiny, how does that kind of overplay onto the cultural side? Are folks taking care of themselves? I mean, post a strike, we had like 3 strikes going on last year, and so how are things going on in the culture world? And then how are you doing?
Well, thanks, Rev, for asking that, and definitely shout out Destiny, Tamara. I just want to kind of piggyback because I think that all of what you just asked, Rev, I think it all goes like it's all a part of the same thing. Like that, and I think part of it is where we keep breaking down, like we said, culture and movement. But then Tamara eloquently said, we're people. We're humans. Excuse me, we're humans, and I think that a lot of it is that we keep, separating these different things where we're just humans. And so the job or the hats that we wear doesn't, take away from that fact, no matter what our position is. So I just think that culturally, or just humanly, I would say, uh, I for myself personally, I could start there, because I feel
Yeah.
like that I've, as a creator and as a producer and just as a human, I've had to take different steps and different care of myself than I've seen a lot of my peers take, just based on the fact that I I get to speak to great people like you all. I got a great support system in my life that constantly reminds me to slow down, sit your ass down.
Mm.
It's okay if today you just want to lay in the bed, And so I think the last year for me has been a lot of reflection. I remember at one point thinking, like, am I having a midlife crisis? You know what I'm saying? Because I've been working so much, like you, Rev, I was in the military, got out the military, took a government job, realized that my passion was still music, so jumped into music. So I would say for like the last 15, 16, 17 years, I've just been, running, traveling, then getting into the movement. So then that's taking a whole nother, embodying a whole nother part of me that I didn't know I had at that point. So yeah, I would say that the last year and even the last 6 months really just been sitting down, writing, how do I feel, reconnecting with myself, seeking counsel, therapy from different different people, not even just going to just necessarily see a therapist, but just going to talk to you, Rev, talk to my mom, talk to people that I know that have lived, experienced life, speaking to my friends, just speaking to them as humans, checking in, calling my boys up. Hey, how you doing, man? What you doing today? Hey, okay, man, I'm just checking on how the fam, just things like that. So I think part of it is just me becoming more in touch with myself and who I am as a person. Speaking to my kids, my daughter is taking finals this week. This is her first year of college. My son is in the 6th grade, getting ready to go. I'm sorry. He is in the 6th grade, getting ready to go to 7th grade.
Wow.
So it's kind of like his birthday's next week too. So it's just kind of like living. I've been in Georgia, so that's been a different thing. I've traveled, for work, but my travel was like I bought my house and didn't really see it for 2 years. You know what I'm saying? And then so now I've been home, been able to just appreciate myself, what I've done, my accomplishments, the things that people and the things I've been able to build, and just look around and just see all of that. And so it gives me a appreciation of myself that I didn't have when I was just running. So I would say that Care and Repair for me personally has taken on that, where I'm just becoming more in touch with myself so I can become a better human. And as I get older, I can speak to my sister Destiny, and just, say, okay, and just, help people along the way that and not come from a place of trauma or, hurt of things that I've gone through, but be able to guide folks through their journey, or just give, help here and there. It's not my journey, it's their journey. So when they need help, just be able to give them from a healed place and from a place of understanding that, sometimes there's going to be trials, tribulations, but also understanding that if you do take that extra time for yourself, it's not going to, it's not going to stop the whole thing. You want to show up as a whole person. So I would say just, for all folks, movement, culture, actors, entertainers, whatever you're doing, athletes, it doesn't matter, politicians, just sometimes it's good to just take that time, to yourself, sit down, write, just ask yourself, how am I feeling? Where am I at? Am I on the same path and the same place to where I was planning to go when I started this journey?
Wow.
And so I think for me, I had to do that, and it was able to open up, the next chapter, the next path of my life, where I see like, okay, the vision just kind of like became more clear for me again. So yeah.
Wow. That's
That's
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah. That was, yeah.
I was just gonna say, one of the highlights of being on this team is that our retreat was a baptism in hip hop.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was.
Yes, it was the 50 years of hip hop, but we had really, really, really good seats. That's how you show people you care, you know.
Yeah, no,
At
that's
Rock the
no. In
Bell.
fact, I'm make sure we're gonna make sure we,
I
you
mean,
know,
I can see Rakim's scowl and LL Cool J's face with the same amount of precision as I might see a piece of fruit on my desk. It was great. Like I
listen,
had, you know,
that's going.
Ludacris jumped into the frame and out of the frame, and I was still in the frame. Like, you know,
Listen,
and if you think I know anything about climate, you should you should just play some hip hop, and you realize I know this much about climate and this much about hip hop, right? So it was actually really great to look to the left and look to the right, and we just all nod in our heads and have it. Like it was as good as any conversation we've had because we were just smiling, enjoying the company, looking at all the people piled in to celebrate, you know, this landmark in the culture.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
So
actually
it was
that's a great segue. I actually want to just say because I mean, there's a couple of things there I want to make sure. So one, I want to talk about a little bit about what we have coming up in season 6, and two, because Tamara's going to be talking about, she's actually going to be leading on some of our conversations around Artivists, and this is actually the 10-year anniversary of Heal Our Mother Earth, Home, the album that Hip Hop Caucus did, and I think so. I'm excited about that, and I want to make sure because this time, even with our own producers, this time always goes so fast. I want to make sure we talk about the things going on regarding just the student protests and the student encampments that are happening around the country and the world. So let me just say this: that one, if you can see or you can't see, I'm wearing a hat that says Underwater Projects. Shout out to the Hip Hop Caucus team who produced this amazing documentary. It's going to, if you just obviously go to hiphopcaucus.org, you can find out about the film and see where it's going to be at. I do know it's going to be at it just got admitted into the Essence Film Festival. So if anybody's going down to Essence, yeah, that's amazing.
Really everyone who isn't, you should get on that.
Yeah, everybody. Yes, so that's one. So that's gonna be fun. So if you are in the climate space, you have never been to Essence before. This is your way because I'm just going to see Underwater Projects. So that's going to be there. It's already filmed. It's screened at the DC Film Festival. Shout out to them and many others. But yeah, this is exciting. So that's one. So two, we are going to be talking with the Women of Cancer Alley. That's going to be very important. As many of you know, I'm from Louisiana, literally from right outside. I was born in Shreveport, but lived in Monroe and Ruston. And then so right outside of what we call, you know, it's all really Cancer Alley. So we're going to be going there and be having some important encounters. I don't want to dig too much into that because that's going to be so powerful. I just want you to stay tuned for that. Just because there's some great things around that that are happening. And so that's there. Obviously, we're in an election year that is shaping a lot of the conversations that are happening. And half the world, just want to make sure, I know people always focus on the election here on Turtle Island in America, but half the world is going to vote this year. I mean, around the globe. So that's also very important that there's elections almost in every place. And when there is no election, it's probably there's a war. So it's either or. So
also a negotiation.
Yeah, that is exactly it. But I want to get to this because I know we have about a couple of minutes left, and I want to make sure we have some time to dig into this conversation around the student protest and student encampment. This is kind of what I was piggybacking off what Destiny was saying about how young people in general are doing. So let me just say this. This is actually important for me, and then I want to throw it to Tamara and then get into this conversation. For me, as I mentioned, next year will mark 35 years when I really came involved with a student protest. It was part of Kiamsha. It was at the University of the District of Columbia. I consider it will mark next year in 2025, will mark 35 years when we took over the administration building for 11 days. And that actually helped propel and shape me because it was from that. I was there at UDC. I went to UDC. I had transferred there from UMBC. And I was playing basketball, and I was so excited to be one at a Black college. It just felt so good to be at a Black college. And it felt so good to be there. And then my first day I get there, they take it over to school and protest. So I'm like, okay, well, this is crazy. And so from there, that changed me, because then I didn't want to, that I no longer just want to play basketball. That was the moment that I was like, I want to be in the midst of my people, and then became SGA president, both in my junior and senior year before graduating from UDC, post Kiyam Shah. And then when I was a White House intern, and I was there, and you heard this on past shows, but I literally spoke out against the war in Rwanda, and I almost got killed in the White House. People, you can listen to that past shows. Almost got killed. Fun fact: Bill Clinton literally saved my life, because I wouldn't let go of his hand, because I was like, "Yo, you're going to fix Rwanda." Then I realized I'm in the White House holding the president's hand, and people are reaching for the guns, and I gave him the tie just to kind of divert, and it was a funny moment, but it was a serious moment. But that's when you're a student activist, you're serious. And then from there, having gone through many more, obviously from the anti-war movement, I was one of the first people, unfortunately, to be, when YouTube was created, and then people began to use, as Leslie mentioned earlier, the tool of people looking at videos. I became one of the first videos in 2007 of somebody being beaten by police. Obviously, the police beat me in the halls of Congress and broke my leg protesting against the war in Iraq. That's still there. Millions of people have seen that. And even my kids have seen it, which actually is now. It breaks my heart, because they would be like, oh, this is why he had crutches. Because, see, that's a whole other part to this trauma that, sometimes don't talk to your family about what you're actually going through in the field. But on and on and on. And then I've been arrested at the Trump White House. I've been arrested at the not yet the Biden White House. That maybe it's a little bit of time for that, because who knows. But definitely the Obama White House. Well, I guess it kind of is Biden somewhat. Obviously the Bush White House, and so been there and have gone to the clink. And as Tamara mentioned earlier, Black folk don't like going to the clink. So I'm not with the crew who's like, yay, we're gonna get arrested. I'm not part of that collective. So I'm with Tamara on that. We it's a traumatizing thing to be put in that. The minute that you lose your power, when those handcuffs are put on you, it is the worst feeling in the world, when you are totally at the will of the state. I can't tell you. It is something that goes to the core of your being. So anyways, been around, and I just want to share a couple of things for folks who are protesting that I want tomorrow to talk about divestment and why there's a connection in that. I just want to say that for those I gave you my 34 and a half year history, and obviously the Hip Hop Caucus is a part of that, 20 years in that. But in those 35 years of being in this movement, I would say the reason why this can repair conversation is important is because it is a tactic of the enemy to burn you out. That is actually a tactic. There is a goal that you are young, and they will burn you out so you become bitter, jaded, and cynical. You do not last beyond your 30s or 40s. I can't tell you how many student activists do not make it to their 30s. For many reasons, they literally shift, they do certain things. So it's a tactic. So understand that it is a goal to take away your peace. It is a goal to ensure that you are unstable. It's a goal to ensure you don't have resources or infrastructure. That is part of the goal of the other side, to wear you down. And so you have to be very mindful of that you don't get worn down. Two, who you're around is very important, because everybody's not on the same page as you. You may think you're on the same page, but everybody's not on the same page. And there's some folks who've been around this movement for a long time and are just using you for your youth and your vigor. And so be very careful of that. And then also be very careful who you're around, literally, because I've been around long enough now, from Katrina and Movement for Black Lives, to know that the government literally plants people around you. I've been around many movements. I didn't know that lady was FBI. I didn't know they were CIA. There's people who I was literally talking to, was hanging out with. I was having conversations with, who I later on found they were people from the government. So you got to be very careful when you're in these situations, who you're around. And the last thing I'll say before I get to tomorrow is this, and I think for me, faith is very important. Now, for me, I'm a Christian. That's my faith system. I'm also a person who believes in talking to my ancestors and a very strong African religion perspective. But faith, so whatever your faith may be, it doesn't matter what it may be, but you have to pull on something invisible. You can't pull on yourself. The old folks will say down south that the battle was not yours, but the Lord's. And too many of you are pulling on yourself. And that is, you get consumed because then you think you have to do it all yourself. And you don't understand this is a relay race. And you have to run, all you got to do is run your race to the best of your ability and pass the baton to the next generation. That's it. That's your job. And so just understand that on this planet that we are trying to save, to have clean air and clean water for everybody, there will always be a level of war and aggression because unfortunately greed is still around. So just make sure you take care of yourself. Just know that it's very important for you to last, to be a long distance runner. And with that, I think that what we're seeing now with the encampments, and I like to see that they've been talking about divestment. And there's nobody better right now who I know has talked about from climate to what's going on around the globe to discuss divestment is Tamara. So Tamara, how does divestment connect in with this new wave or this next wave of student protests and student encampments?
Well, thanks for raising it and for connecting it. I want to just start off by saying that nobody likes jail.
Nobody likes jail.
Let's put it out there. It's built to do everything that you don't like, right? My grandmother told me, like, it was one of the most effective tactics I've ever seen an elder deploy was tell a bunch of kids that, you can't control the remote control in jail unless you can fight everybody. And I have like 3 cousins who were like, well, I won't be going there. So, so I feel like they are very real. Material conditions has become a very trendy way of saying what you feel, see, hear, and experience that you cannot control. That is psychological warfare. We build industrial complex around it to remove you from your humanity, take you from your personhood. So when we're talking about things like care and repair, it's about restoring your humanity, reminding you of your personhood, allowing you to access the dignity that you were born with and have every right to, no matter what you do for a living. So whether you street the streets, or you fight on the streets for care, repair, or peace of mind, or dignity, or the right to eat food, or live, or remain in the neighborhood you came from, you have every right to rest. You have every right to remain, and you have every right to choose the conditions under which you live your life, because the power you've given the government, you only lent it to them. So everyone, when we're talking about protests, we're actually just renegotiating at the generational level what the agreements are going to be. In movement, it's called community agreements, but the Constitution is a community agreement. We all agree to run in the same direction with the same flag, under the same banner, with the same war criminals, doing things, moving our money and resources. That was a set of agreements that we have to constantly renegotiate to make sure it's not doing things in our name and with our corporate resources as a bunch of people who agreed to be together or were born into that agreement, that it's not happening on terms we don't accept. So when we're talking about protests, what we're actually talking about is people going, actually, there's a comma. I don't like that. That what you're doing with my money and my resources, my children or their bodies or their future or their air and water, I didn't agree to that. So I think we have to recognize that the apparatus of protest is a set of tactics, but it's based on a strategy to fight, wearing people down, weathering people to death. And the whole system that does it, whether you show up for people or planet, or you just show up and you're being weathered out of the choices you would make about where your children would go to school and whether you would be able to have autonomy over your own body, which is also being renegotiated at the same rate as potholes crumbling in the street and the planet taking back every single road we built into the ocean, right? So I just want to put the conversation around divestment, and I'm going to call it divestment 4.0. The moment we're in right now, where we're renegotiating the conversation around the apparatuses of war and whether we want them to be pointed at our family in the Ukraine, whether we want them to be pointed at our family in Palestine, whether we want the entire region that surrounds it to be consumed in war and all the environmental debt that comes with that. Like, the people are in the streets talking about this right now, but that comes from a long history. From 1966 to 1970, when students took over campuses, if you watch the news, they'll talk to you specifically as though there was nothing that happened between those protests by students in the 60s and the students that are outside in the street at the City College of New York, at Columbia, at Harvard, at Yale, at Emory, at every place where kids are demanding answers to these questions and to be brought into the negotiation. So flagging that, the South African riots the South African protests around divestment were about making sure US dollars weren't being put into a fight to vote on our behalf to separate people from their dignity. So doing that all came from the same fights for cultural relevance and humanity and to be seen in cultural and Africana studies, in feminist history, in Chicana studies, and the right to have an education that recognizes that your history is not the same as the people who colonized you. Like, so we're in a third or fourth version of that conversation unfurling on campuses. And so while, if you watch the media, you get moved quickly through 50 or 60 years of people protesting, they weren't protesting about different things. They were arguing about what the future was going to look like. And so it is very important for us to recognize that divestment is the same as defunding. Divesting from South Africa is defunding the idea that based on the color of your skin and how quickly you take in melanin, you should be allowed to have access to human basic things, rights, and ability to live. That's also true whether or not you live in a mineral rich place that people want the oil and gas for, and whether or not you should have the right to grow food and live and have your life and grow children and not grow children if you want to, because other people want access to that stuff. So we are just in another version of this negotiation. It's important for us to really recognize that even in a good protest, some people have to sleep. Like a good protest is one where people organize around the things it takes to be a human being who does it. You can't have a revolution if you don't have toilet paper, because people will not stand outside for more than 5 hours if they can't go to the bathroom. You cannot have human beings activate in this way against entire systems without recognizing there's food that has to be brought in. So in the same ways that we're talking about mental health as a component of health, we're talking about protests as a way to check the body politic to make sure it's doing what the people gave it power to do. And so if you don't have a side, you need to check your own pulse. If you haven't figured out where you are in it, if you think it's fine for children to hang out in the streets, sleeping outside, waiting to have the police called on them in what is now a private institution in some cases, you're not recognizing that the negotiation is already happening, because places of learning are being treated as though they're simply property and people are an encroachment on it. So we're just in another version of this same conversation. And it's just another reason why we have to have these multi-generational conversations around what we've been fighting for, how it's changed, and if it's moved, because divestment 4.0 is as important as divestment 1.0 and the original version of all of this, when people had their things taken with a similar form of violence that just became the system we're fighting now. So that's to say on all of this.
Yeah.
But it feels a lot like yesterday and today are looking pretty similar.
Well, let me turn to Destiny on that, because that's one. Obviously, Matt, I'm not sure if you know much about yesterday or even from that standpoint, but I really come about today from your standpoint. And this is the question that comes up for you. One, respond how you want to respond to all what Tamara just said about what's happening, but also, do you and us together, meaning young people and people who have a little bit more gray hairs on them now, are we moving our movement forward, or are we doing the same tactics? Because it seems like the enemy is changing their tactics. Are we changing our tactics? Because one, it doesn't seem like people are dealing with just police departments. What I saw in Columbia, what I see down in Atlanta with Stop Cop City, we're dealing with militaries. Are people ready where people are being arrested in an age of AI? They're giving, literally, they're now under the auspices of the government, where they can take body fluids and keep them. They can take facial imagery of people. They can store that differently. Is the tactic, and I've definitely been student protests and people coming together, but is that a 21st century tactic that's working right now in the 21st century?
Mm, there's a lot to say off of your questions, Rev, and your context, but also what Tamara said. So I'm like, I might not go in order, but what I was thinking about in terms of what Tamara was sharing is how student activism has shaped our work. Um, at least I know for like the three of us, Rev, Tamara, and myself, I was also a student organizer not that long ago. And honestly, I still haven't processed the trauma of it. And I've been talking about that recently, to the point of what you were talking about, Rev, of like, it takes a lot to be a student organizer. You're sacrificing a lot, right? Many of the people around you, your family, folks, might not understand at all and really wouldn't understand why you would put all that money, your degree, the support system that went into you going to the university, like why you would put that on the line, right? So that
Yep.
context is important for people to just to think through like what students are enduring right now. Like not only are they enduring the physical violence by militaries, yes, it's a different situation in that context, right? But also like graduation is happening right now. This is May. People should be able to enjoy the time of, relishing in their accomplishments, of getting that degree, of finals. Students are still taking finals. Some people are in encampments taking their finals, contextualizing that, right? You should be able to like be enjoying the springtime. Springtime at college is like one of the best times of the whole semester. Being on the yard, on the lawn, or wherever your university calls it, taking the sun in, reading the good book, writing. Like, let's just think about like what it was like to be in college for those who have been, and for those who haven't, like what it's like to be in community, outside and in a place where you are supposed to feel safe and where you can explore your curiosities, right? That's not able to function right now because people are rightfully taking a stand, to Tamara's point, and changing and negotiating community agreements. I really like that framing, and I would like folks to like sit with that around how we are in relationship with one another as individuals, as communities, as organizations, as states, as cities, as countries and institutions. Like the way we interrelate with one another and what we agree to and what we don't is really what drives the world and humanity. But so I'm thinking about that contextually. And as a student organizer who was fighting against Howard University administration around how they were greenwashing and how they weren't supporting students on campus or like our department when it came to environmental studies, but were vocally expressing otherwise and tearing down um, infrastructure that was built by students and community on campus to make sure each other were well, like our community garden and a host of other things, right? I was organizing in that sense. And what does it mean to be at a HBCU, one of the number one HBCUs, many years, I know it goes back and forth. Shout out to all the HBCUs. And what does it mean to be at the center of all these resources, all this attention, these networks, and we are in a food desert, right? Or like, what is environmental justice? And many of us are coming from EJ communities, from sacrifice zones, like, and that's not contextualized on our campus, or at least it wasn't at the time in a way that was supported. So that was my student organizing journey, and led to my knowledge, the only climate strike to take place on a HBCU campus in 2019 in connection with all the global climate strikes. And I was really adamant about contextualizing that. Like, we're not just striking with everybody else. We're also changing the community agreements with our university around what is important and how sustainability and climate is talked about when we're not a part of that conversation, and like community stakeholders. But I say all that to say, yeah, I still haven't recovered from that because that changed my whole experience. And not to mention the pandemic, like, started as I was in the middle of my student organizing, and it impacted that. And I had to change my whole relationship to not only my community, but to my institution. And like having to take care of myself, as a lot of people did, and like, not retreating, but having to reorient my life. And I kind of left some things unfinished and still processing that, right? But to bring it to today and to tactics, yeah, police is militarized in a way that we have not exactly seen before. Technology has advanced. You mentioned AI, like facial recognition. Who knows what they're going to do with all this information once you are arrested, right? And so I think in terms of tactics, a diversity of tactics is always important, and I'm always in support of that. And I think if we look at movements, to your point about yesterday, it's taught us the importance of having a diversity of tactics. are we taking this time right now to very thoroughly look at the history of movements and where people left off in their tactics and what was important? I'm not entirely certain, and I don't want to generalize, right? I'm not in all of these student encampments, so I don't know. I do know there's a lot of political education happening in these student encampments. There are free libraries set up. Shout out to Haymarket Books, who I get a lot of my books from. They've been donating free books to several encampments. They're screening films. They're bringing in professors from other universities. They're bringing in journalists who were on the ground in Palestine, or doctors who were on the ground. So there is a lot of education going on. In terms of like other movements, though, I don't know where that stands around people who were protesting in the 60s, right, or who were protesting in the 80s. I can't speak for that personally, but I think now is a really opportune time to take deep reflection on that and to actually learn and listen. Like a lot of folks from these movements are still around, and I'm always reminding people of that. We think about the impact of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that was in the 60s, right, and the 70s, and just the huge impact that they've had on culture in terms of how we physically represent and protest, in terms of fashion and so many other things, but also tactics, right? And so those people are still alive. Many of them are still alive.
Right.
Shout out to SNCC, and shout out to all the folks who have historically put their bodies on the line for all of these movements. And we have so much to thank students for, actually. Student movements are the reason that we have a lot of the rights that we do. And so we should really be looking at this time as supporting all the students in the encampments, because because I'm about to return to school, that's another conversation, are laying out the future. We are the future in many ways, but literally how we're putting our lives on the line to ensure that the community agreements that we've set with our nation states, with our institutions, are renegotiated right now. So I say all that to say it's an opportune time, and people should be looking more deeply. And I'm glad that we're having conversations. And we should also be taking care of ourselves. Feed the students. Some people are being starved out, as we've seen. Like, contribute to bail funds in all the ways that you can. And also, like, let's not only look at free Palestine, and free Sudan, free Congo, free Haiti. There are other movements, and there are other genocides taking place, and there are other issues that are taking place, and have been for a long time, just as long as Palestine in some cases. And anti-Black racism is preventing us from having real conversations about that too, and garnering attention there. So I also want to say that, because I know we're wrapping up on time.
Yeah, no, actually, I want to make sure I get Cross. I'm going to make sure I get Cross the last word here.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off. Did that say?
No, I mean, that was wrapping up, and just to say.
Oh, that was it. Okay. All right. That
was alluding to is that we should also be really critical of the media that we're consuming right now, and being critical in the sense of like, okay, why are they talking about that? Why are they not talking about this? Or what aren't they telling me? And where are you getting your news from? Because in the age of digital media, social media, like we mentioned, there's some huge polarities going on around people's media literacy, which I think is really interesting as a trained journalist and a journalism student. But people are choosing to talk about things, just like how Tamara mentioned, people keep going back to the 60s. How are they skipping over the 80s and divestment from South Africa? This is this is a continuation of that. We're talking about occupation. We're talking about colonialism, apartheid, right? Same situation. But also now I lost my train of thought. See, look at that. Go ahead, the Cross.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. No. And that's thank you, everybody, for this conversation. I mean, I think it shows how powerful just talking things out is, right? It just makes you feel good. It makes you just brings clarity. And that's what Destiny's talking about, just happening in these student encampments, that people are sometimes they're having the best education in their 4 years. It's happening actually right now in the past 4 weeks. Cross, you get to take us home, my brother. And actually, I want to take it home with this, because one of the things we did bring up last season that's still on the radar is Cop City. And I think that's an important piece, because the one thing that we got to do a lot of freeing around the globe. We got some freeing to do right here in America. And so we saw within the folks who were not Republican, but predominantly Democrat mayor and Democrat city council in Atlanta, and how they literally cracked down and try to break the backs of that movement. in Atlanta, RICO charges and other things. But I wanted to say this, what my question to you is about sacrifice, because one of the things here that I think people need to understand is that you're making a decision. If you think that you can just kind of go back to whatever you used to do, you may want to really think about what you're getting into, because you are making a decision to put yourself on one side for justice. And that's a great decision. But you should just know that once you do that, sometimes there is no going back. I can tell you personally, sometimes people walk out of your life. Sometimes things don't go back to how they used to be. Your eyes opened up when you first went to an Ivy League school or you went to a HBCU. Your eyes opened up. So maybe you can't go back to what you thought you went to. You've evolved now. And so sometimes you may have to evolve past what you thought you wanted. Right. So with that, Cross, I end with this on Tortuguita and how they were killed, and how they were murdered fighting for the Willany Forest in Atlanta. What's the sacrifice? What's your words for those about sacrifice and what needs to be done next?
Sacrifice is that word has it's such a deep word, right? Because we all, like Destiny said, we all have come into what we're doing today for different through different paths, different reasons. I think that for myself, when I'm understanding sacrifice, I know that it's more than me. Like I mentioned earlier, having children, coming from and also coming from a legacy of people who have fought, who have who've had to stand up for themselves. I have had to stand up for myself in many ways, through the military, dealing with different race issues and things like that. So I always look at it as that I'm gonna fight for me, right? And so that was always the mindset that I had. And so at some point I was fighting so much. But one day it hit me like, what am I fighting for? Right. And what are the things that I'm doing? What impact are they actually making? Just to kind of get the understanding. Like the one side is like, you might get with your friends and they're like, hey, we're gonna go do this. You're like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good cause, But then to Destiny's point, you get that education from peers. You get folks that have been doing it, like Rev, Tamara, for a while, that can bring that context together, and then you start understanding what you're sacrificing for. Like I said, for me, it's for my people, for Black people. I've always understood that, even before I was in activism or anything. I just understood that experiencing racism, experiencing just being Black in the school systems. I remember my mom having to sacrifice when we first moved to Georgia, that we were in a school system where you could tell that the Black kids had to go through a little bit more testing and procedural instruction than the other races. My mom got hip to that, and she said, "You know what? We're gonna move to the Black community." And that's what we did. And so even in that, understanding the sacrifice, right? And so as I speak to my peers, my friends that, no matter what walk of life, music, activism, what are you doing it for? I think that at some point in your life, it's fun, right? Yeah, we're having fun, we're making music, but then like, what is this going to do? Who are we feeding? Like even in these conversations that I'm having, I'm sacrificing, maybe some cool points, right? But also to me, it's not about that. It's about when you're, sitting by yourself and you got to look at yourself in the mirror and you have to really ask yourself these questions like, okay, is the work and in the people and the words that I'm speaking, are they are they resonating? Is it just fluff? And some people, that's what they choose and that's what resonates with them. But I feel like that for what we're doing and for these issues, like you said, you spoke of Cop City. I'm here every day, and I feel like even people that have been in the city And having left the city, I'm still having to, educate folks on just the things that's happening, what the sacrifice is, why people are fighting so much. They don't even really understand it. They don't understand that, the Willingly Forest is considered one of the lungs of Atlanta. So you cut down the forest and you're already talking about how, oh, it's hard to breathe. It's this and that. Well, what you think is going to happen if, things like that? So my question always comes back to, sacrifice, but also helping people understand so that they know why they're sacrificing or why these things are happening. Just one last point. I remember growing up when we had to take standardized tests and all that kind of stuff, like my mom will work with me on word problems. Like I remember her telling me this when I was like in the 3rd, 4th grade. She was like, word problems. Because she said, they're always going to try to give you all these other things to distract you, but you have to be able to find the facts within, this equation or with whatever this paragraph is. There's going to be a couple of things in there that you need to look out for, and all the other stuff is fluff. And so that's what the media and all these things are to me. Like, I think I'm trained to look through and see, oh, that's the facts right there. That's important. And so I think that we live in a world, like Destiny said, even with social media and things that are here to distract you. But there's so many things that's going on that, it's easy to get distracted because it's so much. It's hard out here. So when you get off of work, you want to go home, you want to sit down in front of your TV and just relax and, say hi to your kids, and you want to do it all again. But I've learned that even when it's tough, take that extra 30 and then build up that discipline to an hour to just learn something new, to find out why. When I see things, I say, well, why are they showing me this? So then, so it helps me dig a little bit deeper. And then I start seeing other things that they're not showing me to what your point is here. So I think sacrifice, it goes a long way. And once we understand our purpose and why things are happening, it makes that sacrifice, I'm not gonna say easier, but it makes it more worthwhile, and it makes you as a person not really care that I am sacrificing so much because you understand that it's bigger than who you are. And there are a lot of folks that don't know. And so maybe my sacrifice will open the eyes and the ears of someone else that now that they can see what I've done and my peers have done. And then that makes them want to get involved. And then now they sacrifice. So we all sacrifice for each other. So I think that's kind of how I would close that.
Yeah, that's a great way to close this episode of the Producers Episode. Here with Tamara Toles O'Laughlin, Destiny Hodges, and DeJuan Cross. And I'm Rev Yearwood, the host of The Coolest Show. Man, this reminds me of why this Coolest Show is so important. Love you, and stay tuned to season 6 and all power to the people.